If you work in the sound department in the motion picture industry, chances are you've heard the whole joke about nobody ever telling the sound department anything. Well, this is partially a joke and partially true. People don't always tell us everything because they expect us to listen. And furthermore, they expect that whenever they put on their headphones at Video Village, it just naturally to work. So not all the time, most of the time, but not always, information does not trickle down. Usually on bigger features, it does trickle down to all departments, but in smaller television shows or television shows where they just are not necessarily thinking about sound, then chances are that's going to be one of those environments where you miss telling sound departments something. But usually this doesn't happen. Most of the time, it's one of those things where the first AD is on set and they will tell their key set PA or the second spin the dials, talk to all the departments. If they spin the dials, usually departments are on the walkie. And therefore, if people spin the dials, they're going to communicate all the information that people need to know on the walkie. But if they don't spin the dials, or if they do spin the dials and the sound department's not on that, which a lot of teams are not, then because we have our own closed communication system between, the sound mixer and boom operator, sound mixer and utility, or between the whole team, it depends on the team, of course. But on most teams that I've worked on do not use a walkie, or maybe just the mixer will, or just the utility will. And if we don't happen to have the walkie on at that particular given moment, we may miss them spinning the dials, and then people may not come to us. Now, chances are shows that you work on are going to know if you're on walkie or not on walkie, and they're going to know to come to you. But if they say spin the dials and tell everybody what's going on, and they forget the sound department, then of course you don't know information. But what can you do to figure out what is going on? Well, first of all, you're given sides at the beginning of the show. If you haven't heard me say this in the past and you don't know what sides are, it is the portion of the script that you were shooting that day. It's all given to you in a little piece of paper with the abbreviated call sheet on the front, usually in like microfiche type, font. So it's like very, very small, and it's printed on a printer that can't necessarily give the detail to it, so that even if you pulled out a magnifying glass, it wouldn't exactly, be legible in all circumstances, at least. But as a general rule, you will be given that. You can get a call sheet separately. You can also look at that on your phone or something like that. But the call sheet or the sides will tell you what's going on, at least scene-wise order. Now, scenes do change in order. Sometimes you'll drop a scene, you'll pick up a scene depending on actor availability or what's going on. But most importantly, if you follow the front of that, it will more than likely tell you what's going on. Now, the thing that will actually tell you what's going on within a scene once a scene starts is the rehearsal. And that's what we're going to be talking about mainly in this particular video. From a sound perspective, when you watch a rehearsal, you need to listen. No, I'm not going to get all into the whole listening thing again, but I do want you to think about this. Being a boom operator is about looking and it's about listening, because you have to see and you have to hear everything that's going on. Plus, you have to anticipate what you anticipate is going to happen based on what is in the sides. Because you might be doing a show with a lot of minors, and the minors may be in school and they might not bring them to set, so you don't know what their action is going to be. It may be that they say, we're in a hurry, we're not going to block this with the actual actors, we're just going to go ahead and light the thing, because lighting can light without actors, as long as they have stand-ins. But the sound department can't do everything they need to regarding figuring out what things are going to sound like regarding the actors. They can't necessarily figure out how things are going to be delivered, if the actors are going to be loud or quiet, all those little details that you're going to find out in the rehearsal. But let's go ahead and say, for our purposes here, that you are watching a rehearsal with the actual actors and maybe you have a 30-minute setup. Okay, so you watch the rehearsal. What exactly are you paying attention to? You are going to be paying attention to where people move, basically their movements. I'll put it that way. When a person moves, they're making noise. If I'm standing here and it's quiet, you hear all this. If I move and pick up something and move it over there, you hear that. It doesn't matter what I do, even if it says in the script, he adjusts his shirt, tie or whatever. I'm not wearing a tie, as you can see, but whatever. That's going to make noise. Also, it might mess with the lav mic if you have one on. But you will see that in the rehearsal. You will also see anyone that stands up, anyone that sits down, when someone moves from here to there, enters a room, exits a room, if they happen to mess with a prop, if they're getting in or out of a bed, if they're happening to change shirts, doing whatever they happen to be doing in the scene. Messing with a prop is also a very popular thing because any props that you have in the hand of an actor is going to most likely be something they fidget with or they make noise with. Pay attention to anything that's in an actor's hand. Anything that is highlighted or rather put in all capital letters on the sides, chances are that involves something that the actors need to be aware of. A key thing of some sort that the actors need to involve with themselves with. They might need to move a prop. They might need to sit at a computer. They might be looking at a screen and therefore touching the screen or something. They might be loading a gun. Whatever they happen to be doing in the scene, that is going to be in all capital letters. You want to pay attention to that because every one of those things makes a sound. And of course, sounds are not our friends on set. So as you watch the rehearsal and you see an actor walks in this door, walks over here and sits down, then, while you're watching this rehearsal, you know it's quiet. Listen to their feet. When they walk through there, are you hearing their footsteps? Maybe they're not in costume yet. Maybe they're wearing tennis shoes, but they're going to be wearing high heels on the day. And if that's the case, then you want to pay attention to that. It might be something that you say, well, based on this scene, it says rehearsal dinner. Would they be dressed up for a rehearsal dinner for a wedding? Chances are they might be wearing some noisy shoes. So therefore, I'm going to put carpets down to just make sure that no one is going to be killing our tracks with their feet and their traffic. Another thing about this is props. Someone picks up a prop and puts it down. If it's on camera, then obviously you can hear it. But one thing you want to be looking at in the rehearsal is whatever those props are being moved. And can you do anything in the wide master shot to get rid of that? I was working on a show just last week and there was a couple sitting down and they were talking a little bit and they kept putting down a glass right over the dialogue. And one of the things I said is, well, it's after dinner, right? So they're just they have their plates down and they're just kind of putting down the drinks casually and talking. Is it possible that they might have just casually thrown down a napkin and they could be putting it down on top of that? Well, they said yes. And so we just kind of loosely tossed a napkin down there, and there was a part of the napkin where it looked like it was dressed to the scene, but there was a part of it that they kept putting the glass on top of, so we didn't have to hear it. That is one thing you can do, is look for things on the set and things that would make sense and incorporate that into the scene. So after rehearsal, don't just run off set and go to Crafty or the bathroom or something like that. Hang out on set for a few minutes and listen to the conversation between the DP and the director, because the DP is going to most likely say, give me a finder, put a 27 mil on there and line up a shot. When he's happy with it, he's going to hand it to the director, who's going to look at it and approve the shot. Based on that, they will start communicating what's going to be going on in the scene. Most likely the DP will talk to the gaffer and say, I want this light here, this light here, this light over here. Let's add a spreader over there for the turnaround, and we're going to go ahead and do this, and so it's lit. The key grip might, on the other hand, be someone that they say, I want to put down dance floor here, so let's go ahead and roll up this mat on the ground, the carpet, and let's put down a dance floor and some plastic on top of that, or maybe dolly track. But that's something you want to be there to pay attention to, because you may look at a setup and say, oh, great, there's a carpet on the ground. Chances are it's not going to stay there. They always expect it to be pulled up, because a rug on the ground does not necessarily mean it's going to stay there, and anything that's there is going to sound unnatural. I've worked on shots before where we've shot in the grass and I've said, oh, this is going to be great. But then they put number one on the call sheet wearing a little spiky high heel that she can't walk in. So the next thing they do is they say to the grips, hey, can we bring out a whole bunch of some planks, or some, not planks, but they'll bring out dance floor and say, can you walk on that? And of course, oh, great. That means that we have this scene that takes place with an actress walking in grass, but it's going to sound clippy-cloppy. Then you have to put down carpets on that. You want to pay attention to that. That kind of thing right there. Anytime there is a safe floor, don't assume it's going to stay safe. And based on where they say they're going to be putting the dolly track, or dance floor, could mean that you start foot foaming shoes instead of putting down carpets. Or at least you might want to prep that and start that process going, if at all possible. That, of course, means talking and communicating with the utility. If it looks in the sides like there's going to be a weird wiring situation, or you know from working with this person in the past that they wear skimpy clothes, and how are you going to get a lav on there? You might consider telling your utility after rehearsal that this person is wearing this kind of clothing. That way the utility can say, okay, well, I need to go ahead and get this thing going. If I was wearing a shirt that, like, for example, was completely open in the front, that would affect the way that the utility wires the person. So when I say, to a utility, entire shirt is unbuttoned in the front. It's just loosely hanging over. And the shirt is normally done up like this. Well, that means a big deal to the utility, because it's going to affect the way he or she is wiring people. That is something I want to communicate with my team. Usually my practice is I will go to set, I'll watch rehearsal, and if it's a mixer and a utility that I've worked with a lot, then I may not tell them every little thing, because it's just something that I'll tell them the things that I need them to know. But if it is someone that is constantly, changing, or maybe a utility, it's day playing, for example, and I'm working with a different mixer this time than I was last week, or I'm working with a utility that I've not worked with before, I may communicate more information to them that I want them to be aware of, even though they may say, okay, yeah, I got it. It's standard stuff, Alan. But I do this because I want to make sure they have the information that they need. Anytime someone's wearing an outfit like this, and I hear that we're photographing them from this direction, I will know if I see them prepping an RM11 rig, I'll know that they're probably planning on putting it in this little, in the gap in the shirt right there. And if they do that, chances are it's going to be visible. I will let them know that they'll need to take precautions, because, I'll look at them and say, you might want to be aware that they're going to be facing right side to camera. I will inform the utility of this kind of thing. I will also go ahead and talk to the props department and see if there's anything they can do to quiet any of the props if they were overly noisy on the set during the rehearsal. That could mean that someone's moving a tray, or a tray table or something like that that's on wheels, and maybe room service gets called in, for example. And anything on that tray table is probably going to be having things touch. Like anytime glasses touch and you move it, it's going to ding, it's going to make those little ding noises that we all hate. I will go ahead and look at those if I see that they're going to have a tray or something like that, and room services coming in. Anything that moves, I'm going to investigate, because I want to make sure that if it can be quiet, it will be. Another thing to note on this whole moving things is that there are going to be people, perhaps background people, moving as well. And so if it's a scene that involves like an office environment, or there's people on a street walking by, I will go ahead and talk to the second who is in charge of placing background and management of background. I will go ahead and talk to them and say, if you have people moving in this scene, could you please let us check out their shoes? And that way they'll say, oh, okay, yeah, no problem. Or they'll say, oh, I'll pick the people with the quiet shoes. They'll forget, or they're going to get overwhelmed, or it'll slip their mind. Something like that will happen. Or it may sound quiet to them, but it doesn't to our microphones. Whatever the case may be, you want to pay attention to what they do and how they do it. And of course, it doesn't hurt to remind them before they start placing the background, please keep in mind that there's going to be a lot of foot traffic here, and I'd love to get people with the quieter shoes to actually move. So that way, if they are placing someone as maybe buying something at an umbrella stand, or maybe buying something at a cafe, the person that doesn't move might be the person that you have standing in a line, because they have noisy shoes. I've worked on shows before, and they've said, oh, yeah, no problem. Well, it'll be quiet. But then they have a horde of people walking, like 300 people walking. And then, of course, it is just terrible no matter what happens. You will know that very, very early. And then you can, if it's like walking through an airport, you're going to know that it's going to be loud and noisy. And at that point, you might talk to the first AD and talk to the director, or talk to, first of all, your sound mixer, and tell them this is going to be loud. And the sound mixer may say, I'm not concerned with it. It's going to look like an airport. Or you may say, okay, well, do me a favor, talk to the director, talk to the first AD, and make sure that they know that if all these people are going everywhere, it's going to be crazy. Can they not form lines like, ticketing booths or something, and at the ticketing agents just line up a whole bunch of people there to cut down on that? Chances are mixers will give you some sort of suggestion like that if they do care about that. If not, they'll say, oh, well, we see it. It's fine. And sometimes producers will say, I'm not concerned with it. Just, it's got to make noise. It's going to make noise because it's got to look a certain way. fine, whatever. But at least that's something that you will see in rehearsal and by looking at the sides. Rehearsal is key for a boom operator because that's going to tell us most of the stuff that we are going to actually be told. The rest of it is going to happen interpersonally on a walkie, and we're not going to necessarily hear what's going to happen. They'll communicate that information on channel 1, on channel 6, 7, whatever the channels are that they're using, and every department might hear on a walkie except sound, because sound is not always on a walkie. If you happen to work on a team that does use walkies, great, fine. This doesn't apply. But if you're on the team that does not use walkies, then you want to really pay close attention to any of the little details. Anytime you see someone moving around on set that seems like they're going someplace or doing something interesting. On the rehearsal, you will also hear things like drop back for a really wide shot and then come around here for coverage. Okay, that sounds like a wide and a tight to me. Or you see a big, huge window. Chances are they're going to want to shoot through the window. If you're working in episodic television, then chances are every director that comes in there is going to say, look at this set. I want to do this beautiful shot right here. It's going to be the same shot every director sees. That's a beautiful shot right there of the big, huge, big room. But then what are they going to put on the tight camera? If there is a wider shot, can they not do that at the same time? And I will usually, after I hear what they're going to be doing, I'll say early on to the DP, got a question for you. I see that you're setting up for a big wide, or I heard you talking about setting up for a big wide shot. What's your other camera going to be doing at the same time? If they say, oh, we're going to be singling in like this, say, is there another shot that's perhaps wider that we owe that could happen at the same time instead of going in for my coverage? Because I can't boom that. Something along those lines. I mean, obviously on the day I feel out the DP, some DPs that I've known for years, I can just walk up and say, dude, really, you're going to do a wide and a tight, killing me here straight out the bat. And DPs I'm not familiar with, I may go over and say, let me mention a concern I have. I see that you're setting up for a wide shot. I'm concerned about coverage here at the same time because I can't match that. I can't boom that. Do you obviously have knowledge of the shot. You know what's going on. Is there another thing that camera could do other than coverage, or perhaps if we could just shut it down and just run the wide? I will mention that to the DP. If the DP is like, no, I got to do this at the same time. At that point, I'll say, okay, I've tried being, direct with the DP and asking if there's any other shot that we owe, because the DP knows the shots. If the DP shuts me down on that, then I'll approach the director about it. And I know what you're thinking. Well, here he is going to tell. I'm sorry, we all have jobs to do. It may seem like I'm trying to tell on somebody or that I'm going to whine to the director, but the DP is going to do what? Make it look pretty. The sound department has to make it sound good. You've heard me say in the past that the sound department is responsible for half of the experience of watching a movie or a television show. That is true. We are. I don't care what someone says. It is not all about the visual. Even though it's considered motion pictures, it is still, you go to see a movie. Great. That's fine. You can say all that. But the main dialogue for the show is transmitted to the audience through the air, through the hearing that they're going to be doing, the listening of the show's track. Yes, ADR is an option, but it's not one you need to simply rely on. Many of the better sound departments are paid better because they deliver better results. The sound departments that don't necessarily know how to do every little tip and trick that they could to get something quiet, they don't necessarily have the same experience as someone that's been doing this for 30 years or more. And if that's the case, you are paying for that experience. There are some very well-known boom operators that we in the boom operator community and the sound world know who obviously, if they stepped on a set, they're going to know exactly what to do and how to do it, just like any other veteran of that kind of experience. Compare that now to someone who just got out of film school and says, oh, I can be in the motion picture industry. I'm going to do this. And they start taking on little indies. Totally different experience altogether. Part of it is it's going to be a crazy pace if you're just getting $100 a day on one of these indies, because they're going to want to try to get their money's worth out of it because it's self-funded. On a big, huge budget movie, they're going to be throwing away money like crazy. And of course, they'll spend all day doing certain things. So depending on the level of show that you work on also could depend on how much time you have to fix some of these things. But I would say concentrate on the things you are going to be making that are going to be making the most amount of noise and that look the most obvious. So when you look at a script or they'll look at the sides, and you're starting to analyze the scene, and you watch the rehearsal, you're going to know quickly what are going to be the biggest and loudest things. If it is walking and footsteps in the background, see if you can do whatever you can to quiet that down. But always be thinking and looking with your eyes and try to determine what are going to be the noisiest things on that set. Start at the loudest and start working your way down. Because a boom operator doesn't just watch rehearsal and then go to Crafty and hang out until 3 seconds before the shot rolls, come back in there and say, oh, this is terrible, because then you've completely checked out, you've completely boned your team, and it's not going to be good. What you need to do is watch rehearsal, and then what I'll usually do is I'll step off set long enough to communicate with my team as to what's going on. I'll let them know what's going on, and then I will go back to set and I will babysit it. If I see people bringing in a light, I will instantly address it and say, can that ballast go outside? Does this light that has a big fan on the side of it, before they barricade it off and put flags all around it, does that have a low fan noise because I hear it loud? If they put that light on a set, I'm going to be looking at it. If it has any kind of vents off the back, it's going to have fans in it. Those fans are going to be audible. And that happens so many times on sets this day and age. And DPs keep using them. Or if I see that it's a crazy exterior shot and they're needing something really, really bright, I'm going to start paying attention for a lot of HMIs, or maybe even some of these louder xenon fixtures that are just insanely loud. I'm going to be watching for this kind of thing. At the same time, I'm going to be listening, and I'm paying attention to anything that is making a noise on set, because that is what your job is as a boom operator. You manage the set. You are in charge of running the set for the sound department to deliver the very best results. That means identifying through experience, identifying and watching the rehearsal for the things that are going to cause the most amount of noise. Start delivering those or start dealing with those based on the loudest possible sources and work your way down. Sometimes it could be that you have to go ahead and think about what it's going to be like on the coverage. Because if someone's doing an action in the wide and your mixer says, we see it, it's going to be fine. If that person is doing the action directly behind the person that's on camera, they could be doing it partially, and the actor could have a background person out of focus in the background doing something, and they don't need to be that loud. So if you can address it in the wide shot, it won't be an issue in the close-up. Another thing could be if you only see part of the person or their back is to camera. They don't need to be noisy then. That's, of course, stuff that you would talk to with the second. If there's any way to make a prop quieter, start working on that. If they start wide and start working their way in, and you know based on that show what the size of the cameras instantly go to as soon as they go into the Titan, you don't think you're going to see the table, or you ask the DP and he says, no, it's not going to have anything, we're not going to be noisy on the table. Say, great, I'm going to start putting down coasters, or maybe start putting down napkins or cloth, something like that on top of it, even a ferny pad on a table to get it quiet for that scene. These things are managing the set. These things are what your job as a boom operator is, and rehearsal will tell you a lot of information, so pay attention to that. Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.